Greetings, all. I just wanted to do a quick presentation. You can kind of ignore the title here, but basically what this is essentially how the public health community is going to respond to the upcoming changes in the environment as a result of climate change and some other things. So, of course, I'm assuming that you have all visited the EPA and the World Health Organization and everything else on climate change, and you understand the underlying causes. First of all, as far as how we're going to be moving in the future, as a way again to promote public health. If anybody's seen this silly movie, uh, I can't even remember what it's called, but it was Hot Tub Time Machine. I'm sorry, this was the second one. If you notice, they went into the future, and there were those cars that they were using were actually pretty much what it's going to look like. They're called pods, and basically you sit in there, and the pod kind of drives itself after you tell it where you want it to go. This would eliminate or at least greatly reduce car accidents, which is the leading cause of death for those aged 15 to 24. I think it's the leading cause of death for children. So this will greatly eliminate a major public health issue. And of course, at the same time, it's cutting back on emissions, automobile emissions. I would encourage you to check out this website. Go to YouTube and check out this flying car. The thing is awesome. Just really cool. Again, not so much. It's probably still has some environmental emissions, things like that. But I just thought it was really cool. Um, so the trains, there's something called maglev trains, magnetic levitation. They're already being used in Asia, parts of Asia. It's just a really, really fast train. It can travel at 300 miles an hour. They were thinking about putting one on the East Coast between Washington and New York. Hopefully, they'll actually do that sometime too. The guy who does the car, Elon Musk, the guy that does that fancy car, he wants to build this thing. It's called the Hyperloop, and he claims it can go 800 miles an hour. And they want to run it from LA to San Francisco. It would run in a half hour, which it currently takes 7 hours. And then, of course, significant cutback on environmental emissions and all kinds of things like that. So that was transportation, how the transportation is going to change, how the food production system is going to change over the next, you know, 40, 50, 100 years, whatever. First of all, we're hopefully going to move away from the process of using factory farming. At least that's the plan anyway. The United Nations, the World Health Organization, the American Public Health Association, I talked about this before, they're all calling for an end to factory farming and trying to move to more sustainable forms of agriculture, including what's called desert greening. You're welcome to pause this presentation, obviously, and read through this. I'm not going to go through it, but it's a really interesting process where they can actually go into the desert and essentially turn the area into a food production system. Of course, we're going to increase access to produce throughout the world, but especially in the United States, where right now the standard American diet includes about 6% fruit and vegetables, which of course we're supposed to be getting at least 50% of our diet from fruit and vegetables. So we're down to 6%. So increasing produce consumption is going to be really important. And of course that works with food subsidies and things like that. So these nonprofit markets are starting to pop up. There's a group called Philabundance. They're operating a nonprofit supermarket right in the heart of Chester. If you're familiar with Chester, it is a USDA designated food desert, much like Norristown is considered a food desert. So at least parts of Norristown are. So we're going to see nonprofit markets starting to pop up. Rooftop gardens. I've done work with people that have done this type of thing. I've never worked with a rooftop garden myself, but especially in the inner city, they're going to start doing this. The group that I'm working with is actually attempting to build one in Philadelphia. It would be the largest rooftop garden in the world, and we see these in Philly, of course. So, the key to most of these health problems are basically increasing, produce consumption, and you can do that quite easily. This I thought was a little sick. One of the, I'm sorry, I should say, one of my students put this together, and it was basically how they're going to produce beef, test tube beef. I don't think I'm too interested in trying that one. You're going to have to twist my arm for that one. Even if it doesn't have harmful ingredients, I just don't think miss meat all that much that I need to eat it out of a test tube. What we're seeing a lot, of course, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, the farming on vacant city land, see a lot more of that, and that's just kind of a cool little 10 square block area in Detroit. Um, that they've done it in Detroit and they've done it in a few other areas. They're putting little small farms in right down in the middle of the city, and they're using part of them are using a technique that's this is a very basic, obviously, aquaponics system. There's a little betta fish at the bottom there, and you have some basil plants at the top. But they do, I don't know whole farms, but they certainly do fairly large systems, and they actually produce fish and they produce food at the same time, and it's just really mimicking nature. So it's kind of a cool system. People, used to, or they still do, of course, buy homes around golf courses and tennis courts. Now they're doing it around farms, and they go out and work in the farm, and you go and pick your food, and then you go back and cook it in your own kitchen. So they're calling them agri-hoods. And again, not everybody obviously is doing this, but it is happening. More and more people are using this. This is a technique used in Singapore, where these plants just rotate up on this cylinder type thing. I don't know what you would call that, but they would just rotate throughout the day, making sure they get enough sunlight. It's essentially in a greenhouse on the side of an office building, and they just grow the food right there. So growing food is actually really easy. And you can do it conventional ways in the farm, or you can do it using aquaponics, or there's all kinds of really cool things. And unfortunately, people are taking less sustainable ways of eating right now, eating a meat-based diet. So hopefully we'll switch over. This is kind of cool. Sorry, I should go back to that. Some of the ways we're going to be producing energy in the future. We're not going to get off fossil fuels anytime soon, obviously, but we're going to start seeing some more of these things. Once they figure this one out, this is going to be kind of tricky, but using some type of an ocean turbine. Um, Obviously, the problem with this is that it's could potentially harm some sea creatures, so they have to work that out, of course. But hopefully, they'll start to see these kinds of things soon. We're seeing wind energy being used more and more. Again, feel free to kind of pause this and read through this. They say wind could meet all of our electrical needs, all of our electricity needs. And that's true, but our electricity needs really only account for about 1% of our total energy needs. We still need to move our cars and heat our buildings, things like that. Nuclear is it's still pretty prevalent, but it's kind of being phased out just because of some of the problems. You've probably heard about biomass, or at least hopefully you have. Again, I'm going to kind of skip through this pretty quickly. There's some pretty cool projects that are being going on around the world. The U.S. is investing pretty heavily in this, as you can see. About 50% of the global biofuel sorry, biofuel production is occurring in the U.S. But the big problem with biofuel is that you're essentially using food and converting that into energy to move our gas. To move our cars. So that's kind of the issue with that. And then, sorry, I wanted to switch presentations here real quick to talk about some additional forms of alternative energy that are out there. So again, I'm going to skip through this very quickly. Yeah, this is something we should probably take a look at. The World Health Organization, again, you're probably going to see this, about 24% of our disease burden and about 23% of all deaths were attributable to modifiable environmental factors. But that also includes, of course, things like socioeconomics, psychosocial factors, so man-made disasters, poverty, war. So it's a pretty big, category, environmental health, which is why there's a lot of potential issues. Um, this is what I wanted to talk about, is this idea of some of the different forms of solar energy that are being used. This is really cool. It's called passive solar power, and basically it's the way that you design the house. And you basically think about a Spanish hacienda. The way it's built is just meant to optimize the environment that you're living in. So they're zero energy homes. They're called. They're off the grid, which means they're not connected to Pico in our area. It's called Pico, but you're not connected to the power grid. And just solar energy. They do some pretty cool things with the way that they build the houses and naturally heat and naturally cool the houses. They'll probably throw some solar panels on the top as well for electrical needs. These are the PVs, the photovoltaics, which are your most commonly see associated with solar power. But solar power comes in a lot of different forms, including this one. This is really cool, CSP, concentrating solar power. And I don't have time to go into how a boiler works, but essentially, instead of burning coal or burning oil or burning gas to produce the steam, you are using heat from the sun. And those are all mirrors, and they are kind of arranged so that they focus all their energy right on that boiler right in the middle. That tall tower is a boiler. And that way you turn the water into steam that way with this CSP, concentrated solar power. It's kind of it's almost like using a magnifying glass essentially to boost the steam, the power of the sun. And they're building these projects all over. I shouldn't say all over, but they're building them. There's one in California. There's one in Spain. They're building one now in Africa, northern Africa. It's designed, of course, to go to Europe. You can see how close it's connected to Europe, but it'd probably be better if they actually gave it to the people in Africa. Um, but this is, if you look at how much land we would need to use to provide all of the electrical needs for Europe, and then in the whole world, the larger scale. And there's not much in the northern part of Africa there. It's a lot of desert area. So I mean, There's always going to be environmental concerns. The one that they built in California is displacing turtles. So a lot of environmentalists are concerned about that. But we need energy. We got to get it from somewhere. So this is probably the least harmful way of harnessing energy at this point. If we did this in the United States, that red dot approximately represents about the land mass. It's actually not 100 square miles. It's more like 10,000 square miles. It's supposed to be 100 by 100. Sorry about that. So 10,000 square miles in the middle of the desert out there. Again, it's desert area. It's an environmental area. It's a lot of environmentally protected area, but there's not a lot of homes and things like that. So it's kind of out of the way. Any form of energy production is going to be controversial, but this seems to be, a pretty good uh, potential use. So we're going to see more and more of these uses as we come up in the future. Okay. One last thing, real quick, reducing environmental risk. There is a chemical out there. It's called BPA, bisphenol A, and I will post a copy of this presentation. You're welcome to check it out. But this chemical BPA is bad stuff. Please try and avoid it. It is in canned foods. I think I probably talked about it before. It's also in cash register receipts. So if you work as a cashier or you know anybody that does, or when a cashier hands you those receipts, uh, don't handle them or wash your hands immediately after. Or if you are a cashier, use gloves when you're handling those things because it is pretty nasty business. That's the biggest concern, I would say. All right. I hope this was helpful. Take care.